Hey there, crafty friends! It's Tina here from the Scrappin Rabbit blog, and I'm so happy today to bring you this project from the Rabbit Hole Designs as a guest designer for their July 2020 release. They sent me this adorable little bicycle witch stamp, and I'm going to share my project with you. So let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who watch my channel regularly, you know that I like to emboss my images. So I am going to use some VersaFine black ink. And the paper that I'm using is a Hammermill 80-pound weight, which is the one that I like to use for my Copic coloring. I'm going to stamp it a few times. The more images, the better. That way, in case I have any boo-boos, I have my little backup stamped images there. So I'm going to use some clear embossing powder over those stamped images. And then once I have that powder on there, I'm going to use my heat tool. And then that's where the magic happens. I love, love, love the way the embossing looks. And because I'm going to cut this out with my scan and cut, I'm going to stamp several images all over this and then later cut them all out. This is the first time coloring this image, and so I'm going to be discovering all the little nooks and crannies along the way. I'm going to be using my favorite skin combo using my Copics. I start out with the E11, blend it out with the E00, and then the E000, just to kind of lay down that first coat of color. She has a lot of details, and the first time around I did miss some of the little things that I had to go back in and color. For her cheeks, I like that R21, and then blending it out there with the E0000. I do like to do 2 to 3 coats of color with my Copic coloring. My darkest in this skin tone is going to be E04. I find that color gives a really nice shadow. So I kind of go into the areas where I feel like it's going to be the darkest, and then blending out with the E11 gives you a little bit of depth there. And again, blending that out with the E00 and going from kind of a dark to a light. Although I don't start with my dark color. I like the E000 there to really blend that color out fully, and then just to give it that extra contrast, I blend out that center of her face and then the center areas with the E0000. Adding a little bit more shadow there where I feel like the light's not going to hit it so much under her skirt area. I forgot to color her hands, and so there's one hand that I found, and then I'll have to go back in later to get her other hand holding onto her hat. For her hair, before I get started, I'm just taking this really light E color just to kind of map out where I feel I'm going to be adding highlights, and that just kind of gives me an idea so I don't overcolor my image. And there I found that hand, so I'm adding the skin color to that hand there. Going in with my E11, that's going to be the lightest color in my hair blend. And I'm just going to add coats and coats of layer with the little strokes to add like strand-like hairs, and then finding out where I want my darkest areas to be to give it that dimension and to give it some depth. As I'm coloring the hair, it never looks the way that it's gonna look, and it always looks terrible as I'm doing it. But once you get in that first coat, it really does start to come together. Here's the E09, and I had used the E08 right before that. And then the darkest color in this hair blend is the E18, and that's going to give you that contrast and really give you that appearance of depth. And her hair is really long and flowy, which I love. And I'm just going to continue to go in there and then go backwards now from the E18 to the E09 and then to the E08. And then that's where I go the dark to light and the light to dark, depending upon the size of the image and what exactly I'm looking for. I just look at it and I add color as I see fit. And I am really slow with my coloring, you guys, so I hope that this isn't boring you, but I do like how it does turn out in the very end. Here's that 11, and I'm just going to blend it out to really have those highlights standing out there. Now as you can see, it's starting to come together, but then now I got to go in there with that the dark colors again, just to kind of add that depth and add that dimension. I find that taking my time and going over with the layers really does make a big difference. And then if I find that I don't have clean lines, then I'll blend it out with my lightest color. And here I'm going in there with the darkest color again, and then that really is going to do the trick for the contrast. I love to color hair and I love to color fur, and I do like how it turns out when you use a 4-color combination, which is what I tend to do. There I found her ear, so I had to make sure I got that colored in. Just adding a little bit more shadows in her neck area. And as I go, I realized she has more hair there, so I had to get that hair that was under her chin area behind her arm. So I'm just adding a little bit of color there. For the pumpkin, I'm going to use my YR09, and that's going to be the darkest color, and I'm going to add in the little shadows there, blending it out with the YR07, and then using this next color. Which one is that? That one should be the YR04, I believe. Yes, and then blending it out with the YR12 as my lightest color. Going back in, doing a second coat there, and I just love how she's got that little pumpkin there. She's just riding her bike home from the pumpkin patch. So cute. So I decided that I wanted to do her dress purple, and so I'm using my purple combination there. Most of my markers are in the sketch, but I do have a few that are not. So for her dress, the V17 and then the V15, the V12 and the V01 are going to be my color combos. I'm going to blend out those little shadows that I put in there using the V15, or the shadows were the V17 and I'm blending out with the V15. And then going in lighter with the V12, adding a little definition there to her bosom, blending her dress out. And for those of you who are beginners at coloring, just keep at it, keep at it. I feel like I learn something every single time. But when I look at my projects from a few years back, I really do see that with the more coloring that I do, the more I tend to improve. And here I've been experimenting with little creases in the clothing because that is not my strong suit. I'm not really a strong colorist when it comes to a lot of depth and perception, but I do work on it, and I do feel like I do get better over time. Blending it out with the V12, and then the very lightest color that I'll bring out is the V01. This paper that I'm using, the Hammer Hammer Mill 80 pound, really takes in the color and blends super nice, and it's really affordable paper. It tends to be my go-to. This is that black. I'm going to be, for the hat, I'm going to be using the toner grays. And the dark color here is the T9. I actually go one darker. I do go to the T10 in the end to try to get it even darker along the edges. Blending it out, going from dark to light. And then I will use, the lightest color will be the T3. And one layer down, now I'm going to go in with the T10 there and do a second layer of color, blending those colors out again, trying to get a little contrast for a little depth, filling it all in. I was going to make her hat purple, but then I thought, no, I'm going to do black because she'll have her black hat and her black boots. I think I did her boots black. Yes, I did. I did end up coloring this image 3 times, and like I said, this is the first one that I colored. For the kitty, I'm going to go in with the W's, the warm grays, and going light to dark on this one because I wanted there to be contrasts, because I didn't want to color in that little face. I really loved how cute that face is, so I wanted it to have a little pop there in the center. So cute in the basket, and I love those little eyes and the little whiskers. Adding a little R20 for the little cheeks and the little ears. It is really a tiny, tiny image. For her lips, I'm adding some R56 and R81. And I just think that that color looks so fabulous on her. For the basket, I'm going to bring my E40s, and the darkest being the E44, blending it out with the E43 and the E42. For the bike itself, I'm going to go in with some more purples, but this time using V28 as the darkest color, and then V25, and then V22. This image has a lot of detail, and even though some of these lines are really thin, really skinny, I did try to give some shadows and a little depth, even to her little bicycle. So the purple is different enough to not blend in with her dress. And then of course, to coordinate with that bicycle, I used some cool grays for the handlebars and for that basket, as well as the little wheel, the center of the wheel. The little hand grips I coordinated with the V28. So that pretty much covers the witch. Now I'm just going on to color up some of the bats using my toner grays, the darkest color being the T10, and then blending it out with the T7, T5, and the T3. And again, adding 2 layers just to kind of give some depth. And this is the largest bat, and it's still pretty small. And then there's 2 smaller images there. Blending it all out. Adding a second layer of color. And then once I get the rest of the bats colored, I'll have the images for my card. I did go ahead and color up 3 of the witches there. There's the first one, the one that you saw me do with the red hair. I did one with black hair in a purple hat and dress. And then the last one I did was the black hat and the black dress, and she has the brown hair. And then of course I colored up all those bats. For the base of my card, I'm going to do a slim line using my Mama Elephant dies, and I cut out the scallop panel using Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and use Distress inks to do my inked background. I prefer the Distress inks when I want deep color because I do like the way that they look over the oxide. And I'm going to use my daubers because they're very well loved. And for heavy color, I feel like they do the trick. When I want a light brush of color, I'll use my brushes, but I'm going to use my daubers. So the colors that I'm using, the spiced marmalade there is that yellow orange, and then I'm going to blend in that barn door going into the seedless preserves. So this is kind of an experimental background. I did one sunset background, and that's kind of what I was going for. And I can't remember if I used this exact color combination. I may have, but after the seedless preserves, I'm going to use the dusty concord. And then for the night part of the sky, my 2 favorites would be the chipped sapphire and then the black soot. I feel that that really makes it nighttime. But because it's such a long panel, I wanted there to be more color to this card, and I felt like the purples really helped to make the witch pop with her dress and her bike. And then the red also helped to draw out the red in her hair. Now this is just the first layer that I'm doing. So what I'm doing now, I'm actually going to do a complete second time off camera. And so I'll end up with a double layer of color. So this is how my final panel looks, and now I'm going to splatter it with some water and absorb it with this paper towel, and that's going to give me some stars on the background. I'm also going to water down some white acrylic paint with this paintbrush, and I'm going to splatter that all over my card because I love the way that that white paint looks on the background for additional stars in the night sky. And because I'm a big fan of sparkle, I'm also going to splatter with some glimmer mist, and I'm just going to take the spray out of the bottle and shake it over the top. For the sentiment, I'm going to use that panel that I cut out, the top layer, and stamp the sentiment "Rooms are for amateurs" using my anti-static powder tool and some black VersaFine ink. And then using the same clear embossing powder, I'm going to go ahead and heat it with my heat tool, and then the sentiment is done. Now it's time to put together all the different layers, and I'm going to use some liquid glue to glue my top panel on to the inked background. And then now it's just time to figure out where everything is going to get glued down. I was sent these sequins from the Rabbit Hole Designs along with the stamp, and I'm just placing them how I think I want them to go, and then using the liquid adhesive I'm going to go ahead and glue down the images as well as the little sequins. Get them nice and glued down, and that's pretty much going to be it for the design of my card. The last thing to do will be to glue that onto my card base, which is a 3.5 by 8.5 inch card base slimline design. And that finishes off my card. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this process video, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time, bye for now.